And as we count down to the start of the event, let me just go ahead and just play a quick video just to let you know what's coming up about AIM 21. I'm really excited about this. So let me go ahead and just play this video before we start our webinar today. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. I think it's about time for us to get started here. So let me go ahead and share a few slides here, just so we can get things started. Hey, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, The Future of Intelligent Capture, the Launchpad for Radical Transformation. And I'm Teresa Resick, the Vice President of Market Intelligence at AIM, and AIM is your host and producer of today's event. Very much want to thank Periscript for being the underwriter of today's webinar, and thank them very much for their support. And thank you everyone in the audience for taking the time to join us today. As we get started, just wanted to share a few tips for participating in today's webinar. As you may notice, we're using a different platform for this webinar this year, and I appreciate your patience as I'm getting to learn things as the producer of the event here. But by joining live, awesomeness here, there's a few things that you can do. Look to the chat feature, and throughout the event, I'll be sharing some resources as we go through there. So look for those links to come up in chat. Do ask questions of the speakers and use the Q&A feature for that. And we'll do our best to get to as many of those as we can towards the end of the event, well, later in our webinar hour. And this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIM.org's resources webinars page in a few days. And also, last but not least, I love my feedback surveys, and we'll be launching that out towards the end of the event. And I'll also post the link for that up in the chat feature for where we'll also have the resources. I'm going to introduce our host and MC for the day, Kevin Crane. And as AIM's content strategist, Kevin authors ebooks and infographics on a wide variety of intelligent information management and digital transformation topics. He is the producer and host of AIM On Air podcast, which was recently named one of the 10 best business process management podcasts that you should listen to. So I'm very pleased to turn things over to Kevin right now. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Teresa. Thanks a lot. Podcast. Those are kind of just spit those out there. But thank you so much for that great introduction. And it's my pleasure to be here again for another AIM webinar, The Future of Intelligent Capture, the Launchpad for Radical Transformation. And you know, digital capture of documents isn't new. But over the past few years, the technologies and the processes have undergone a revolution fueled by machine learning. And in this webinar, our guests will discuss traditional approaches to document capture versus newer machine-enabled document processing approaches. And we'll also do a little bit of crystal ball gazing to look at how these changes provide a platform for much needed modernization, automation, and digital transformation. So get ready. In the next hour, you'll get a better understanding of the fundamental differences between traditional approaches to document capture and modern AI-driven approaches, how document capture provides a launchpad for mission critical process improvement, and steps that you need to take internally to propel your strategies forward and complement your day-to-day business. So with that, I am going to have the great pleasure of announcing our two presenters today, starting with Alan Pell-Sharp. Alan is the founder of Deep Analysis, an advisory firm for enterprises and technology vendors. He's an expert in disruption, AI, machine learning, and blockchain, with over 25 years of experience in the IT industry, working with a wide variety of organizations that we know, people like FedEx and the Mayo Clinic and Allstate, just to name a few. And he's worked with vendors from everyone from Oracle to IBM, and is regularly quoted in the press. We've seen him in the Wall Street Journal, The Guardian. He's been on BBC, ABC, NBC as an expert guest. So welcome, Alan, to our event today. Alan will be joined by Greg Council, Vice President of Marketing and Product Development at Periscript. Periscript software automates document capture and supports transactions and governance and process improvement. Greg is responsible for the market vision at and product strategy at Periscript. He oversees all the aspects of the software life cycles and product strategy and the introduction of advanced technologies in the marketplace. So it's great to have Greg here. Greg's thought leadership has been enhanced by his 20-year plus experience in information management. So with all of that said, welcome Greg and welcome Alan. Alan, tell us more. What about the future of intelligent capture and radical digital transformation?
Intelligent capture, radical digital information. Radical. Okay, I'll try and do a radical presentation. I've got about 15 minutes here. As Teresa said, this is a new platform. So hopefully I'm gonna hit the right buttons and share the right things with you. But as we're sort of getting going here, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Kevin there was saying about how AI has come along in the last few years. I mean, AI itself isn't new, but a lot of things are new and have come along and started to truly disrupt this marketplace. When we say this marketplace, what do we mean? Well, it's traditional capture. And I'm always a bit wary of using words like traditional, but of all the things in IT that have been around a while, this one certainly has. And it's an area just about every mid to large organization knows something about, whether you outsource this or whether you have a scanning department in-house, typically in the basement, sadly, but you've got scanners and you're scanning paper. That's sort of the world of traditional capture. But what do we really mean by that? Well, in practice, despite actually a lot of advances in software over the last 20 years, most of the time what people do is they scan and they capture a fixed image, like a TIFF image, for example. Now, in some cases, goes a step further than that, and we use technology such as OCR, optical character recognition, where we extract, essentially sort of, recognize the characters on the page, and then we're able to build up maybe a text file, an index, or whatever. But again, actually, most of the time, even that's limited. So traditional capture really is pretty traditional. It does a few things. It's important. It's very important. It's not very sexy, but it's there. It's important. People do it. It's definitely underappreciated. It's definitely human-centric. A lot of people are involved in that kind of work, whether that's ad hoc scanning or whether it's a sort of formal department or bureau. It's typically under-resourced. And as I say, it's scan, index, store. That's sort of the parameters of it. And that's a real shame. I mean, at the same time as I'm saying here, that's all they do. This is quite grinding work at times, and it is business critical. But what's actually happening now, and certainly has happened at a technical level over the last 5-6 years, particularly over the last 5-6 years, but really starting to come into, I won't say the mainstream, but easily accessible now, is this sort of shift from, as I described on the previous slide, all we were really able to do before was recognize the characters, maybe recognize some words. Some technologies could go a little bit further than that. But really what we were doing, we were taking the letters, the characters off a page and making it understandable for a machine. That's what we were doing. Well, now the technology is on the cusp of massive change. And again, to be clear, the technology itself works today. That's sort of sorted. It's whether people in the enterprise, in the real world, take this forward and use it is the sort of the next big step. That's where we're at the cusp of people actually using this. And instead of just taking those characters, those words, and making them sort of accessible to a machine, we've actually got technology today that can, as good as darn it, read. All right, so that we can actually understand, that can learn and improve, that can realize that there's context here in this document. And more than that, even the sort of core things which we've sort of got used to, the actual capture elements, that bit of reading a character on a page, even that's got much, much better. So we're getting to a point now where we can sort of read text, for example. It could be barcode, it could be anything, but we'll take text as an example, anywhere, anytime on a mobile device, and often in suboptimal conditions. And what we mean by that is we don't necessarily need, although it's still very handy in some cases, to have that optimal situation of a flatbed scanner with perfect lighting and perfect contrast. We're actually able to do an awful lot more now by just pointing a phone, and there's a lot of software in there that makes an effort, shall we say, to fix and optimize that situation. So again, if we're comparing and contrasting where we've been and where we are, we scanned. Now, not everything's perfect, so we do some corrections to make sure we recognize the right characters, and then maybe we create a text file, maybe we do some indexing. But now we have technology, which, yes, is machine learning, is AI driven. I think more loosely and maybe more accurately, we could call it neural networks. And people want to talk about that in more depth because we haven't really got the time today. But if you want to ask questions at the end or come back to me on this, we can certainly dive in much deeper. But yes, we are still extracting characters, but we're extracting structure now. We're actually reading the words. We're actually able to enrich those documents, those files. We're able to classify them automatically, and we're able to just start actually using them in their fullness within an organization. That's a massive step. That's a truly massive step. And I think we're at a point now where, as I say, the technology is there. We've got neural networks that can do the basic things you'd expect them to, like recognize a space and a word. But as I say, go much beyond that to do sort of semantic analysis of what's in there, to actually translate documents if need be, and ultimately to automate decision-making processes. That is a huge step that we've taken over the last few years. There's been big advances in technology. It's pretty well tested and proven stuff at this point. And the opportunity here for us as an industry is truly enormous. And I'll be frank with you, as an industry analyst who's been covering this for a long time, it's not been a very exciting area to cover because very little changed over time. But now we're at a point where we're seeing changes all the time. We're seeing new use cases come about. We're seeing some crazy stuff come along where you just think, wow, if that's possible, then what could we do with that? So we're really at a point, and Kevin used the word transformation there. It's a word that we use all too often and far too glibly often, actually, I think, in our world. But this is truly transformative stuff. Think about it this way. If you are capturing really accurate data, if you're able to categorize it extremely accurately, if you're able to extract context and understanding, what you have here is many things, but one is a feeding point for artificial intelligence, machine learning, and automation. AI, enterprise AI, any kind of AI is nothing without accurate, timely data. And that's where we've been held back in the enterprise. Is we've been looking at legacy systems and structured data, and we've been ignoring the real-time feed of information which is coming into our organization through these capture points. And now that's possible. And again, just to be clear here, when we say AI, when we say machine learning, when I use terms like neural networks, deep learning, computer vision, whatever, these products that are coming to the market, they're lots of things. They are bundles of different AI capabilities. Some are capable of doing really good language translation. Others are fantastic at spotting and reading the contracts and clauses in legal documents, etc. Others are good at doing sort of semantic analysis. Lots of different things, and that's the point here. The technology is very sophisticated. The challenge here, and it's an exciting challenge, is for you to take that and optimize it for your business, your organization. It doesn't matter if in your private, public sector. I don't care if you're worried about personal information being shared, whatever. These problems are problems we actually do understand and we know how to fix. It's available now, and you need to get involved with it and optimize it to your specific needs, because that's the missing thing. It's a terrible analogy, but it's a little bit like knitting, right? You've got the wool, you've got the needles, that's your data, that's your tools. But without a pattern, you've got nothing. And the pattern is now available for us to really do something with. Now, we still need skills, but again, not as many as we used to. A lot of these products are, I won't say straight out of the box, and you can just switch them on and get them working. It's not quite as simple as that, but much more accessible than people probably realize. So we're at this point where we can sort of reimagine what capture is. Standard things which have never really been standard, but we've talked about for a long time, like straight through processing of invoices, for example. That's very possible, and you're taking a lot of human steps out of that process. You are taking a lot of error out of those processes. So things like that are very much open. But it's really a Pandora's box. You can open it and who knows where it's going to take you. A good team, a good company that's got a good strategy can really do something here. But definitely faster and more accurate decision making. I think that's the key to this. This is how you can help make good, quick business decisions by using, we call it cognitive capture. You can call it intelligent capture. You can call it intelligent document processing, whatever you call it. We've taken a big step forward here, and we're opening the doors to do new things. And if you're going to do new things, and if you're on this webinar today, I assume you are fascinated and you want to start exploring future use cases. Now, here's just some key steps that we would share with anybody, and some of them are a bit obvious, maybe some of them a little less. But what we do find with projects that are starting out is they often start in the wrong place. So one of the first things you want to be doing is really understanding your current situation. I mean, again, this sounds like common sense, but common sense isn't always that common. So figure out your as is, imagine where you want to be, do some kind of gap analysis between the two. I'm sure you might already do that, but here's the things which are maybe a little bit new. In fact, there's one in particular I want to focus on, which is adopt a learning cycle of development, of deployment, of optimization. The cool thing with AI-driven applications is that you don't just switch them on and walk away. They augment what you do as a business. So we use terms like human in the loop, and that sort of makes it sound quasi data science, technical, whatever. But what it actually means is these systems are really powerful, but without your skills, without your deep understanding of your business requirements, they can only do so much. And they may not work very well at all, actually. They augment what you do as an organization. So you don't just switch them on and walk away. You stay involved with them. These are tools which will continue to learn, will continue to improve, and you will continue to collaborate with them to bring about the transformation you need. So again, I just wanted to focus on that one before we jump forward, because that is a fundamental reset for most, virtually all IT projects, where we design something, we go through some kind of process, we get to a go live, we switch it on and we think, well, hopefully that's it. It's not what we're doing here. We're bringing something in to work with over time. So the big challenge then, and you maybe got the theme of this, but is challenging mindsets, right? The technology is available today. It does require rethink. There are lots of opportunities out there. But if I can just take one of these bullet points here, better, quicker, cheaper. That sort of was the mantra of Silicon Valley from the late 90s onwards. That's what we want to do. We want to do everything better, quicker, cheaper. Well, we would argue that with AI, it's not the best way of thinking about it. What you want to think about is something that's adaptable, so that as you change, and that could be anything from the forms of your documents changing to your business changing, that can actually adapt and grow with you over time. Yes, it's got to be affordable. We get that. But what are the benefits it's going to bring your organization? I think when you have those conversations internally, how can this actually benefit us? And how will it be adaptable to change over time? We've had enormous change in our real world this past year. And, you know, life has changed anyway. So change is inevitable, embrace it. But technology systems haven't typically done that, right? So now we're talking about capture systems which will embrace ongoing change. So the biggest change is changing mindsets. And so with that, I'm sort of rounding up my sort of quick intro here, and I'm going to hand over to Greg in a second. But just to sort of finish up here, change is coming. I've sort of made that point, I'm pretty sure. But what we've got here, as I say, is not out there crazy technology that you're going to need a team of data scientists and recruit everybody straight out of MIT. We're talking about well-proven, well-tested technology that you can get up and running fairly quickly and that will adapt and learn with you and your organization over time. We've got some research on this as a cover sheet there. You're welcome to go to our website. It's free. And read some more. And I'm here for questions. I'm going to hand over to Greg now. But if you've got longer questions or deeper questions, my email details are here, and feel free to reach out to me. So with that, I will head out for a while and pass over to Greg Council.
Hey, thanks, Alan. Okay, now I'm going to share my screen. All right. So hopefully you guys all see that. Again, my name is Greg Council. I head up product management and marketing at Periscript, and Periscript is one of those intelligent document processing vendors. But I'm not going to talk about our product, so to speak, or the functionality. Based on what Alan said in his presentation, there were 4 things that I thought were pretty interesting. Well, actually, all of it was very interesting, but there are 4 things that I really want to dig into, more specifics. So without further ado, let me just go through that. In reverse order, ability to work in suboptimal conditions, software that learns and improves, software that understands using context, and software that requires minimal human intervention. And I'm going to take those top down, but I introduced them in reverse order just for something different. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig into some of the more complex aspects of it, but hopefully in a way that is less complex and sheds a lot of light, because while intelligent document processing or intelligent capture or document capture, however you want to call it, has been around, as Alan said, for quite a bit of time, and it's a very mature market, the technology of itself is undergoing just rapid changes, largely due to the machine learning area of artificial intelligence. So let's talk about technology that requires very little human intervention, because I think at the end of the day, actually, I know at the end of the day, the ultimate reason for intelligent document processing is to completely obviate the need for anybody to actually manually work with documents, the tedious stuff. So what I have in front of you is a slide that I consistently try to always improve and change. And it represents 2 scenarios. One is the 100% manual process, and this is an imaginary organization, but it's based off real data. And let's say you've got 300,000 fields on, or data on documents that you've got to process at a daily basis. And based on calculations, that roughly is the equivalent to 21 people doing that in order to keep things flowing. In the middle, you've got something where you've applied some sort of intelligent document processing, or OCR, or intelligent OCR. And what this represents is you've got 70% automation in the data entry portion of it. So of those 300,000 fields, 70% of those are successfully able to be located and then extracted and captured, leaving some level, 90,000 fields left to go. But in every case, the software itself is configured. The way it's configured is that you're forced to have to review all of the data, because the software essentially can't really reliably discern between good data and bad data. And what that means is that you're not fully achieving the full level of automation. And I say everyone using captures here. The reality is this is probably the best that most organizations have when they're using intelligent document processing, but this is nowhere near the level of automation that we can achieve today. This last level can get you upwards of 90% automation. So we're taking the equivalent of 21 staff and bringing them down to about 2. And there's some magic in terms of the technology involved, but it's really not magical. There's a lot of effort involved to taking you from the 70% to 90%. It's the equivalent of taking a car from 200 miles an hour to 300 miles an hour. You effectively have to double the horsepower. But the really cool thing is that it is achievable with the technology at hand. So what's the issue? Why isn't everybody there? Simply put, it takes a lot of effort to get there. Traditional solutions, up until even today, require an outsized level of effort in order to achieve a significant amount of automation. It's why most organizations are, happy with 50% at that, at best, because, if a software, unlike CRM or something like that, which you can define and review and implement based on functionality, IDP software or intelligent document processing is really based off precision. Anytime you involve precision, you're inherently requiring a lot of effort upfront and ongoing in order to achieve and then maintain that. So it involves things like data preparation. There is no system in the world today that gets any kind of level of operations where you're not taking a good amount of sample data and looking at it and making sure it's representative. Configuration effort. We all know, anybody that's involved in this, you have to have a very well-trained amount of staff, or you're paying a significant amount of professional services to get the configuration. And that follows with the testing and tuning. And then once it's up, you're not done. You've constantly got to maintain and monitor the system. Anytime requirements change or documents are added, you've got to do the whole thing over and over again. And that really represents an outsized cost. So let's talk about, more specifically what we're looking to achieve when we're applying new approaches. And these are 2 concepts that I want to bring up, and we can certainly spend hours talking about them, but I don't have that much time. So there are 2 things that are important. First is system accuracy. System accuracy basically represents the total amount of data a system can produce that is accurate. So going back to that scenario of 70% automation, if I can take out of 300,000 fields and get 210,000 of them successfully extracted and accurate, then that represents a certain level of system level accuracy, leaving 90,000 fields for data entry. But you still got to measure it. You still got to validate 100% of it, which leads us to the second piece of it. And that is really the true key, the unintended automation rate. And this is made possible by a thing called a confidence score and the corresponding confidence score threshold. And I'm not going to get into the definitions or meanings of those because they involve the art and everything, but I'll be more than happy for anybody to reach out to me and I'll go into as much detail as you want. But that is where the key is, because not only are you automating data entry, you're automating a significant amount of the requirements to review the data to ensure that it is indeed accurate before it flows through to your secondary and tertiary systems, where you can do a lot of damage if you're operating on bad data. So that is really the key there. So that is the core essence of the ability to get unattended automation, is you've got to know the system accuracy and you've got to know how the system is able to understand what data is good versus what data needs to be verified. Ultimately, what you want to have is 2 rivers of data. The data, the larger bit, should be the big, broad river of data that is accurate and is accepted. The system knows that it's accurate and it can flow straight through, leaving only the small stream or tributary of data that really needs to be verified or data that couldn't be located for data entry. So ultimately, this is what it looks like. And we've got an entire ebook that covers this at great detail. So let's talk about a second topic, systems that understand using context. Most machine learning, in fact, if not all machine learning, is really around this thing of, it's called classification. So even OCR, the core or the root capability is the ability to classify one letter from another letter. So I can classify in the English alphabet or the Latin alphabet, 26 characters, and I can determine through classification what's an A and what's a B and what's a Z. Or for Alan and our friends across the pond, I know that there are some out there, a Z. When we take it at a more complex level, everything just gets continues to use this classification, but it's really about identifying one thing from another. So, for example, an image of a cat or not a cat. Or for document classification purposes, is this a contract or an invoice? So with that behind us, what that really means is that we rely on the ability to label things and understand when things are what they are. Most often, intelligent document processing software uses what are typically called keyword value pairs or tag value pairs, where we can identify labels of data and then locate reliably the values of that data we have. But in a lot of cases, or quite a bit, especially the more lucrative areas where you can save a lot of money, we don't have the availability of tags to locate information or the reliability of specific patterns like dates to find that information. So you've got to use something else. And this is where I find it very exciting, because it takes intelligent document processing into another realm. And that is the application of grammatical context. So context being information about information, or you could call it metadata, but it's anything that the system can use to better understand the information in front of it so that it can effectively do its task in an automated way and very reliably. So on the left side is an example of an insurance policy where 3 types of coverage are shown. And you can easily see here, we have values, we have amounts, and we have in the blue, we have green, which is the tags essentially, but it's not presented in a way that's reliable so you can use keywords, because the values or the amounts can be before or after, and how do you do that if it's buried in a paragraph? Ultimately, what you want to take is move it from the left to a more structured representation, which is on the right. But how do you do that? What is the art in being able to provide that level of structured information out of effectively unstructured documents? And the answer is bringing an additional level of context. This time it's not keywords, it's not expected formats like dates, it's grammatical context in the form of verbs, nouns, named entities, all of those types of useful type information about the information that then machine learning algorithms can use in an effort to be able to locate all the key information buried within that paragraphs or pages of data. And we're really excited about this, again, because it moves us from the old days of forms-based recognition to the more modern semi-structured data, like within remittances or invoices, all the way to this truly unstructured information that is indeed, you still need it to be in a structured format. So this is an example of using, within a lending scenario, often information that is buried within more unstructured information. So this is a deed, a grant deed. And the task that the software needs to automate is the location of the legal description. And the legal description is a paragraph typically, but it's not always a single paragraph, and it's definitely not always in the front. And it's quite obviously not always using the same language or providing tags. So you see this progression of an image of a deed coming through. Firsthand is we've added context in the form of the ability to locate paragraphs, separate out those paragraphs and sentences, and then we're applying grammatical context in the form of natural language processing toolkits to be able to find very reliably the information that, let's say, an underwriting process actually needs. And we're taking, even if it's a few seconds of time to manually process it, we're moving that to completely a compute time process where nobody has to do it at all. And that's just one example. So let's talk about systems that learn and improve. This is another topic that Alan mentioned or brought to the focus. When we look at, or when I look at learning within software, and especially within intelligent document processing software, I can see 2 types of buckets, if you will. One is on the learned side. So the learned type of software is what ParaScript has been providing for several decades now, which is software that has been trained and optimized in our labs on hundreds of thousands, if not millions of examples within specific areas. And we then release that software and let other people use it. And it's, again, it's highly optimized. It does what it does very well, and that's good. But it also has an inflexibility in terms of being able to adapt or modify it to your specific requirements. On the other side are where we have most intelligent document processing systems today, and that's on the configurable side. So it's not necessarily the learning side, but it's, the essence is you can take the software, you can fit it or configure it to meet your specific needs, and it does a very good job. But the benefits are that it's highly adaptable, but the drawbacks is there's little out-of-the-box capabilities or optimization, and all of that is on you. And the benefit of learning systems is it can take both of those types of approaches so that you can essentially have your cake and eat it too. And what I mean by that is you can have highly optimized out-of-the-box capabilities, such as what we've been providing and other vendors have been providing for decades, and then using machine learning, let it fit these models to your specific requirements and your specific data. And what that allows you to do is you're taking this kind of generalized approach that is optimized, but very limited, and you're fitting it and improving performance on your data, but also expanding the capabilities of the system, but without the typical effort that is usually required. And this is something that is really, really interesting. I can liken it to Google image search, where, I'm sure everybody's used Google image search where you're looking for something. Let's say you want to look for a cat. This doesn't happen by magic. Google has taken tens of millions of images along all sorts of things. And if we're looking at just cats, what you have is two data sets, one with images that are tagged as cats and one with images that are tagged as not cat. And you're letting the machine learning algorithms identify what we call features. And these features can be some things that are very obvious, like the shapes, but they can also be some things that are not very obvious, at least to us humans, that can still be very reliable in terms of identifying a cat from, say, a dog or those types of things. And you're letting the software automatically identify these features, determining which ones are reliable, and then creating these models that allow you to find images of cats. And with machine learning applied to document processing or document automation, there are two areas where we largely apply this, and one is classification. So within classification, we're not obviously looking at cats, although the same software could do that, but we're looking at document-based information and noting things like presence of paragraphs or tables or logos or even handwritten information. So it's visual-based information and it's textual-based information, and you're taking that in concert. And we're identifying features that are reliable, again, to determine a specific document type one to, as compared to another type of document. And this is all in service of automation at the document level. When we look at data extraction, we're essentially doing the same thing, except now we're turning our attention to page level information. So rather than trying to identify what the document type is, we're trying to, armed with the knowledge of what the document is, we're trying to apply certain types of rules in order to be able to locate specific information, whether that is traditional standardized forms-based information where you know where the data is all the time, to semi-structured data like what you see in front of you, which is an invoice, or even unstructured information, which is what I showed you with the lending example. We're looking at and letting the system identify reliable features such as fonts, which are oftentimes very reliable, but not obvious to the human eye. Sizes of fonts can even be something, but all sorts of very detailed types of features in service of producing the most reliable, most comprehensive amount of data for you. There's some other benefits that are actually only now being understood and organizations are availing themselves of, and that's in the all-important proof of concept. So if we can use machine learning to automatically configure the software on your specific data, then you can turn a lot of the effort that is typically around paying a vendor or requiring a vendor to do the work, or you to learn the software to the point where you're most effective and configure the software. You're taking all that attention and you're turning your attention to the output of the data. Realizing again, the real goal of intelligent document processing is to produce the most amount of data from your documents in as high as accurate, in a as high accurate amount as possible. So if you can use machine learning, not just in production, but to configure the systems and focus only on the output, then it is truly an apples to apples comparison. And you can focus on selecting the system that can produce the best performance for your organization. Another topic is where previous systems fail. So what I mean by that is there are a lot of use cases where intelligent document processing just would not do very well. Let me give you an example. Here is something that I think all of you, at least in the United States, might recognize. The text, and it's all written, it's written information. Literally 4 years ago, the ability to transcribe this type of information was practically impossible. The reason being is for every person that writes, it's a font. So the difference between handwritten information and machine printed information is we can pretty much train software to understand every single font out there on a computer, but it's really impossible to do that at the human level, at handwritten information. So typically handwritten data extraction was limited to very fixed use cases or very focused use cases, like what you see: check recognition, mail automation, and forms recognition, where you know the data, you know where it is, you know the range of values that you can expect. It's a name, it's an address, those types of things. It allows you to bring a lot of context to bear. Another example is data or image quality issues. So traditionally, software was not able to deal with very dense forms that are black and white or fax because of scaling issues, a lot of noise and everything like that. So in terms of healthcare claims, even though you've got better than 90% of this automated through EDI or through red dropout forms, when it comes to black and white forms, these are largely still manually processed. But with the advent of deep learning specifically, we can take and transcribe without providing context, without providing vocabularies or anything like that, from what you see on the left, which is the full handwritten, to being able to break out words and then transcribe them into highly reliable text. Now, it's not near the precision of text, typical OCR. So where OCR at a word level or a character level is 98 to 99% accurate. The latest versions of handwriting recognition at this level, without providing context, are around the low 90s. But still, that is significantly better than where we were just 4 years ago. And you can imagine the types of use cases that this will support. And on the forms or image quality side, or if you call it image perfection, we can effectively take a black and white, faxed, really poor document and clean up and identify the real data versus the form structure and remove it, effectively creating a red dropout where you're only leaving the data so that the recognizers can do the best job possible, and taking something that is largely 10% automated and moving it to 90%. So that these are things that are now really showing promise. So in summary, I think, right about time. The four concepts, things I want to leave you with: minimal intervention, in order to achieve a high level of automation, used to take just a significant amount of effort. And for that part, most organizations stopped well short of applying automated document processing to their full gamut of workflows, leaving it on the simple things like a forms recognition or the most exposed types of areas. That's not the case anymore because of machine learning that can configure itself using your sample data. You can focus on curating really nice input sample data and then focus on the output and optimization. And in the middle, you leave that to the machines themselves. So that is something that more and more organizations should be expecting out of their solution providers. The definition of context. Whereas structured forms, the context used to be provided in the format of X and Y zones, right? So everybody knows about drawing those little boxes and everything like that. We don't need to do as much of that anymore. And the context that we can avail ourselves of is, now inclusive of grammatical constructs to allow you to find that really important data out of an unstructured contract or a policy or whatnot. So again, that just expands the range of use cases without expanding the amount of complexity and the effort that is typically required to be able to pull that data out. Learning and improving is a core benefit. Obviously those two first data points are really at the core a benefit of machine learning specifically, or mostly with deep learning neural networks, but it still requires planning and effort. So it's not a silver bullet. I mean, it does pretty much reduce a significant amount of the complexity and effort. But what that means is you need to focus on the input data sets, the data sets that the software is used to train. And this requires a little bit of data science. And this is, to be very clear and blunt, most organizations don't have a really good grasp of. So it doesn't matter if it's an intelligent document processing project or some other type of project that utilizes machine learning. More and more emphasis is going to be on the areas that are around acquiring the business data and cleaning it and QAing it and making sure that it is representative of what you really need to automate. And that's really the I guess the Achilles heel of machine learning, but it's also the benefit because you can focus on the data. Lastly, the working under difficult conditions. Increasingly, the software can do more and more with data that traditionally it couldn't deal with at all. But it still isn't magic. So one of the things we often get is we'll get, well, not often, but every now and then we'll get sample information around handwriting and saying, you know, we can't even read this information. Can your software read it? The answer right now is if you can't read the information, our software can't either. So you still have to come with it with the right amount of expectation set. As Alan mentioned, it starts with the expectations, but realize that the software can do more and more and more as these new techniques and technologies are applied to it. So with that, I'll hand it back to Kevin. But before that, here's a little bit of contact information for our company. I'm also putting my email address on here. I don't typically do that, but in this case, I covered a lot of things that are technically complex. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to take this slide set or another slide set or send you additional information that will help you understand the technology and what it takes. Kevin?
Very good. Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Alan. All right, we've been listening to Alan Pell-Sharp of Deep Analysis and Greg Council of Periscript. And before we get to some questions, we do have a poll that we'd like to run, one of our AIM polls. Teresa, do we have that poll? Let's launch that poll now.
We do have the poll here, and we've launched the poll out there, and the question to everyone is, what stage is your organization at for intelligent document processing using machine learning? The answer options are information gathering and considering the intelligent doc processing automation, building requirements for an IDP project, selecting vendors for an IDP project, document-specific IDP implementation, enterprise-wide IDP implementation, or you have no intelligent document processing plans using machine learning that you're planning to date. So let me just give you another couple of seconds to answer that question there. And I'm seeing some interesting results here. And I'm going to push it out to the audience so we can all see the results here. And Alan and Greg, feel free to join in with Kevin looking at this. So let me go ahead. I'm going to end the poll right now, and I'm going to go ahead and share the results.
Interesting, Teresa, that most folks are either gathering information or have no plans to date. I'm wondering if that's consistent what Greg and Alan see across the board as well. Are we still in the very early adoption curve of all of this?
We are. So I'm just jumping in here, Greg, sorry. Yeah, it's very consistent. That's actually really interesting. I mean, the reality is, as both Greg and I have said, that the technology is there. I mean, the technology is there. I think the challenge for a lot of people is knowing what to do with it. And, you know, let's be serious, this past year, there's been a big acceleration in where do we go? What are we doing? What were we doing wrong for all the wrong reasons, right, with the pandemic? But it's thrown a lot of these traditional activities into question. So I think people are absolutely in the planning stages. I think that's to be expected. And also, I think where people don't have any plans, I think that's fair enough. I think, again, I don't know that many people realize that, as Greg and I have been talking today, that these big leaps have been made. I think it's still early days getting that message out to people.
Well, one reason maybe it occurs to me is that many organizations outsource their document capture needs. And Greg, what in your experience are outsourcing firms doing in terms of adding this intelligent functionality?
Well, you know, I think that's a very astute observation, is that it's one of the kind of mandatory things that you outsource because the software in itself, I'll admit, is so complex that to get any kind of reasonable scale, unless you've got billions of documents you're outsourcing and can spend a lot of money in professional services for a bespoke solution, the only way to do that is through outsourcing. But also, we work with quite a few outsourcers, and the level of automation adoption within the outsources themselves has been kind of meager as well, and largely because they've been able to essentially use arbitrage with offshore labor, right? So if I need to spin up a project and for a client, it's a lot easier to take some sort of staff and spend a couple of days on training them how to do it versus to erect the system and configure it and whatnot. So there's still a lot of white space in terms of automation for the outsourcers themselves. But we're also seeing a lot of end user organizations wanting to take that on themselves because the software is getting to the point where they can do it.
Now, Alan, I wanted to get back to something that you had mentioned early on in your presentation, and it was about adopting a learning cycle. One of them was manage the change, and I know that's a big topic that we could talk all day about. But what I often hear from AIM members and practitioners is that managing the change and getting a seat at the table for change agents, much of the people that are listening, working with us today, is difficult. So all of this is interesting, but how do we get senior management excited about it? Any tips?
I don't know it's a tip, but an observation. I mean, you're right. It's traditionally been very hard. And you take an activity like document capture or records management for that matter, or information governance, important things, but getting senior buy-in or even interest has long been a great challenge. I think one of the things I pointed to, and I think Greg did as well, is, yes, there's all these possibilities of what we could do with intelligent capture in the future, but one of them is providing the information that AI needs. There's virtually no digital transformation project in the world at scale that isn't focused on AI, blockchain, etc. I mean, they're leveraging these emerging technologies. Without accurate, timely data, it doesn't work. So I think one of the ways to get that attention and get this up the food chain is to point out that, look, the data that is coming into our business today, not something that's been sat in storage for 5 years, the stuff that's coming in today that we need to action today, we need to fix this process. We need to get really accurate data to feed into this transformation project. So I think there's the potential here to really, to use the word transform again, to transform this to a much higher level in the discussion. Because honestly, I've seen so many projects which are digital transformation projects led by big consulting firms costing huge sums of money. They fail because they don't have timely, accurate, quality data.
And a connection with the other initiatives ongoing. I assume if we have an AI initiative underway within the organization, this is something we should involve them with.
I think so. I mean, I'm sure there are exceptions to this, but at the end of the day, think about it. You've got sort of two ends of the capture world, right? You've got the back file stuff, oh, it's all over with now. Let's scan it and store it. Okay, that's perfectly valid. But we have information coming in every day. Greg was referring to faxes there. I mean, I know people working in healthcare that fax dominates in sectors there, right? That is information they need now. And so if you can capture that now, actually add some value to it in terms of augmenting that data, route it to the right people, that's a transformation in and of itself.
All right, very good. I want to thank Alan Peltz-Sharp from Deep Analysis and Greg Council from Periscript for being our guests today. And before we go, I want to talk a little bit about AIM 21. Teresa, do we have the AIM conference slide that we can put up? This year, the AIM conference is going to be different. We're going digital with a galactic digital experience. April 27th through 29th. And did you know that AIM members can receive $50 off of their registration? And you know, that's almost a third of the cost of your membership right back in your pocket. And so there's never been a better time to join us and experience an out of the world event. You can find out more at aimconference.com. That's AIIM conference.com for more information and to register, get your seat today. So we're almost out of time. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank you for being our guests today, and I want to thank our participants. Now, we've recorded this webinar, and you can catch it anytime you want to hear it again. Look in the chat bar for the resources. There's some really cool stuff in there that you want to take away with you today. And also, there's a link to our feedback survey. As Teresa mentioned, we'd love to hear your feedback about your impressions of the event today and overall, so that we can continually improve what we bring to you. And finally, I'd like to thank our underwriter Periscript today. Periscript, without the support of our supporters and providers like Periscript, we would not be able to bring you these valuable AIM and free AIM webinars. So thank you to Periscript. And before we go, one last thought from our speakers today. Alan, if I could start with you, closing thoughts on today's discussion.
I think, you know, as an industry analyst, you know, I'm not a technology vendor. As an industry analyst, this has so much potential, this space. Yes, from the technology standpoint, that's super interesting. But for people's careers, get involved now. I mean, this is going to take off. That's not in question. So if you're involved in information management, get involved in this now, because you'll be in there early, and this could be a massive change point for you, I would say.
That's Alan Pell Sharp. Find him at Deep Analysis. And Greg Council, your final thoughts for our discussion today.
Where to begin? I would, in a nutshell, I would say expanding use cases are definitely the name of the ability of the software, but also with that expansion of use cases means the expansion of focus on the absolutely critical and necessary input training data. So the two go hand in hand, and I'd argue that even with traditional forms capture, you still need to have a really good sample set. So start focusing on input data. If you don't have enough input data, you don't have any reason to progress in a project. Start there.
All right, that is Greg Council with Periscript. And with that, I'd like to bring our webinar to a close. I want to thank everyone once again for being with us today. And I am Kevin Crane for Teresa Rezick and the rest of the team at AIM International. Thanks for attending today, and we will see you next time.